I almost didn't notice it at first. That's the part that haunts me most. My granddaughter had come over for the weekend. She does that sometimes. Sleeps on the pull-out in the spare room, watches old movies with me on Saturday nights. She was 12 years old, and she noticed something I had been too ashamed to see myself. She walked into the kitchen Sunday morning, opened the refrigerator, and stood there for a long moment. Then she turned around and looked at me with those serious brown eyes of hers, the ones that look exactly like her grandfather's, and she said, very quietly, "Grandma, there's nothing in here." Like, nothing. I told her I had been meaning to go to the store. She looked at me the way children look at adults when they know something is wrong, but don't yet have the words for it. Then she said, "Grandma, you get your pension every month. Dad told me it's a lot of money. So why is there nothing in the refrigerator?" I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Because to answer her honestly, I would have had to explain things I didn't fully understand myself. I would have had to explain how a woman who spent 41 years as a registered nurse, who raised 2 children on her own after her husband died, who paid off her house and saved carefully and invested wisely, how that same woman ended up standing in her kitchen at 67 years old, unable to buy groceries. I would have had to say the name I had been avoiding for months, my son's wife. Her name was Diane, and by the time my granddaughter stood in my kitchen asking about the empty refrigerator, Diane had been in control of my finances for 14 months. Let me go back to the beginning, because none of this happened all at once. That's the thing about situations like mine. They don't arrive like a storm you can see coming. They arrive like fog, slow, quiet, and by the time you realize you can't see clearly anymore, you're already lost. My husband passed away 11 years ago. Heart attack, sudden, no warning. We had been married for 38 years. After he died, I kept working. I wasn't ready to stop, partly because the routine kept me sane, and partly because I wanted to build my retirement the right way. I worked until I was 64. By then I had my pension from the hospital, a retirement account my husband and I had built together, and the house, which was paid off completely. A 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. My son, I'll call him my son, because that's what he is to me. Whatever else has happened, had married Diane 6 years before all of this started. I had tried to like her. I want to be fair about that. In the beginning, she was pleasant enough. She remembered my birthday. She brought dishes to family dinners. She called me by my first name, which I preferred. But there were small things I noticed and then talked myself out of noticing. The way she would sometimes answer questions that had been directed at my son, as if he weren't capable of answering for himself. The way she would make financial comments, casual ones, dropped into conversation like they were nothing about how complicated it must be managing everything alone at my age. How she worried about me, how she and my son both worried. I was 65 when she first said the word, simplify. We were sitting at my kitchen table. My son was there. My granddaughter was in the backyard playing with the dog. Diane had made coffee, which I thought was kind at the time. She sat down across from me and said she wanted to talk about something, and that she hoped I wouldn't take it the wrong way. She said she had been thinking about how much I had on my plate, managing the house, managing my accounts, keeping track of everything. She said it seemed like a lot for one person. She said she and my son wanted to help. She said the word simplify 4 times in that conversation. I counted, later, when I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep. I told her I was managing fine. She smiled and said, of course I was, of course. She just wanted me to know the offer was there. 3 months later, I slipped on the back step. It wasn't serious, a twisted ankle, some bruising, nothing broken. I was back on my feet in a week, but Diane treated it like a turning point. She came over every day while I was recovering. She brought food, she helped around the house. She was attentive in a way that felt, at the time, like genuine love. And then, carefully, over the course of those weeks, she began suggesting things. Maybe it would be easier if she helped me with the bills while I was off my feet. Just temporarily. She could set up automatic payments, organize things, take one thing off my plate while I healed. My son nodded along. He had always been the kind of man who trusted his wife's judgment. That used to seem like a good quality. I said yes. I told myself it was temporary. I cannot explain, even now, exactly how temporary help with the bills became something else entirely. It happened through paperwork I didn't fully read, through conversations where I was tired, through language that was careful and reasonable on the surface for your protection, just to make things easier. You can always change it back. There was a document she brought me about 6 weeks into my recovery. She explained it as something that would let her handle my banking on my behalf. Streamline things. She had a notary with her. My son was there. I signed it at my own kitchen table. I didn't know, not clearly, not the way I should have, that I was signing a financial power of attorney. I want to stop here for a moment, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking I should have read it more carefully. You're right. I know you're right. But I also want to say this. I was 65 years old. I was recovering from an injury, and the people sitting across from me were my son and the woman he had chosen to spend his life with. When you trust someone, you don't read every line of every document they put in front of you. That trust, that ordinary, human trust, is exactly what she was counting on. The first several months, nothing seemed wrong. My bills were paid. The house was maintained. When I asked about my accounts, Diane would show me summaries. She had prepared printed pages with numbers that seemed reasonable. I didn't access my accounts directly. I told myself there was no need to. Everything was being handled. It was my daughter who first made me look closer. She lives in Phoenix, has for 20 years. Ever since she married and her husband's work took them west. She visits when she can, calls every week without fail. She is the kind of woman who pays attention. She told me later that she had noticed something in our phone calls, something she couldn't name at first, a flatness in my voice, a carefulness. She asked me once, on the phone, what I had done that week. I told her I had stayed home mostly. She asked if I needed anything. I said I was fine. She asked if I had seen anyone, gone anywhere. I said not really. There was a pause. And then she said, "Mum, are you sure everything is okay over there?" I said yes. I believed it mostly. Or I was too far into something I didn't understand to know how to say no. My granddaughter's visit came 8 months after that phone call. After she asked me about the empty refrigerator, I made an excuse. I drove her to a diner for breakfast. I smiled and let her order whatever she wanted. On the way back, I stopped at a grocery store and bought enough to fill the refrigerator, and I paid for it with the small amount of personal cash I had kept separate. Money from birthday cards and small odd jobs, a fund I had started keeping without fully admitting to myself why. That night, after my granddaughter was asleep, I sat in the living room and I let myself think the thought I had been refusing to think for months. Something is wrong. I did not sleep. Instead, I thought about the last time I had actually looked at my full account statements. I thought about the pension checks that went to an account Diane now managed. I thought about my retirement savings, a substantial amount. Money my husband and I had set aside for decades. I thought about the house. The next morning I made a phone call. Not to my son, not to Diane. I called my daughter in Phoenix. I told her everything. All of it. The document I had signed, the accounts, the summaries Diane gave me instead of real statements, the grocery situation, everything I had been minimizing and explaining away for over a year. My daughter was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Mom, I'm coming home." She arrived 4 days later. She didn't tell my son she was coming. She drove from the airport directly to my house and sat down with me at the kitchen table, and we went through everything I had, every piece of paper, every document I could find. What we found was not what I had hoped to find. My pension had been deposited into an account that Diane now controlled. From that account, the monthly household bills were paid, but the amounts being transferred to household expenses were significantly higher than my actual bills. The difference was going somewhere we couldn't immediately trace. My retirement account had been partially liquidated. A withdrawal of $47,000 had been made 14 months earlier, another of $31,000 6 months after that. Neither withdrawal had been discussed with me. The reason listed on the paperwork was owner request. I had not requested them. My daughter sat across from me, and she was very still and her voice was very level when she said, "Mum, I think you need to talk to an attorney. I want to tell you what that moment felt like, because I think it matters." It didn't feel like revelation. It felt like the floor dropping out. Not because I was surprised. Exactly, some part of me had known, had been knowing for months. But there is a difference between suspecting something and seeing it in black and white on documents laid out on your own kitchen table. My son was involved. Not in the planning of it. I still believe that, even now. But he had allowed it. He had signed things alongside Diane. He had nodded and agreed and looked the other way, and whether that was weakness or willful ignorance, the result was the same. Nearly $80,000 was gone from my retirement account. My pension had been used as a personal fund for a year, and the house my paid-off, 30-year house had been listed as collateral on a business loan I had never heard of. I did not call my son that night. My daughter advised me not to. What I did instead, with my daughter sitting beside me, was make an appointment with an elder law attorney for the following morning. I want to say something about that attorney, because she matters to this story. She was a small woman, maybe 50, with a very direct way of speaking. She did not treat me like someone who had made foolish mistakes. She did not use a gentle, careful voice, like she was handling something fragile. She looked at my documents, asked me clear questions, and then told me clearly what I was looking at. She said the power of attorney I had signed was valid, but she also said it could be revoked. She said the word revoked and something in me exhaled for the first time in 14 months. She said the withdrawals from my retirement account appeared to constitute financial elder abuse under Ohio law. She said the business loan using my home as collateral was more complex, but potentially actionable depending on how the documents had been obtained. She said she would need time to review everything, but that I should not under any circumstances wait to begin the revocation process. That same afternoon, I signed a revocation of the power of attorney. The attorney filed it. She contacted my bank and my retirement account provider directly. When Diane tried to access my accounts 3 days later, she was denied. I was home when my son called. He was not angry exactly. He was confused genuinely, I think, and that confusion made me sadder than anger would have. He asked what was happening. He asked why I had done this without talking to him first. He used the word family several times, the way people do when they want to use love as a reason not to look at what they've done. I let him talk, and then I told him what my daughter and I had found. The withdrawals, the pension, the house. There was a very long silence. He said he hadn't known about the house. He said he thought the retirement withdrawals had been discussed with me. He said Diane had told him I had agreed to everything. I told him Diane had not discussed those things with me. I told him I had signed a document at my own kitchen table while I was recovering from a twisted ankle, and that whatever Diane had told him about my agreement, it had not happened. Another silence. Then he said her name, quietly, like a question. I said, "I think you need to have a conversation with your wife." The attorney pursued the matter formally. The case was referred to the Ohio Adult Protective Services, and a civil suit was filed. I will not pretend the process was fast or simple or without pain. My son cooperated with the investigation that matters, I believe, and I think it says something about who he actually is underneath everything. Diane did not cooperate. She hired her own attorney and insisted the withdrawals had been authorized. But bank records don't lie. Account access logs don't lie. The documentation my attorney assembled was detailed and clear. The civil settlement required Diane to repay the full amount of unauthorized withdrawals, $78,000 in total, over time, with a structured repayment plan. The business loan using my home as collateral was voided because the notary documentation showed I had not been adequately informed of the nature of what I was signing. My home was cleared of the lien entirely. Diane and my son separated 8 months later. I don't take satisfaction in that. Whatever I feel about what Diane did, my son is still my son, and watching a marriage end is not something I wished for. What I did wish for, and what I have, is this: my own life back, my accounts in my own name, my house free and clear, my pension deposited where I direct it to be deposited. My granddaughter came for another weekend visit last month. She opened my refrigerator and smiled, the way 12-year-olds smile when they see exactly what they're hoping to see. She pulled out the orange juice and poured herself a glass and didn't say anything about the previous visit. But I remembered. I will always remember that she was the one who made me see it. I have had people ask me, since all of this became known to the people in my life, how it happened, how someone with my education and my years of experience and my independence let something like this go on for 14 months. And I have thought about how to answer that honestly, because I think the honest answer matters more than the comfortable one. Here is what I know. I am 67 years old. I am not confused. I am not frail. I am not incapable of managing my own affairs. I managed them for over 40 years without anyone's help. But I was grieving, in a quiet way I hadn't fully named, and I was tired, and I trusted people I should have trusted, because trusting the people you love is not a character flaw. It is the most ordinary human thing there is. What Diane did was not a mistake. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a calculated, patient, methodical exploitation of my trust. And it worked for a while because she understood exactly which buttons to press, the ones labeled, "I'm just trying to help and we're family, and this is just temporary." I want anyone watching this who is in a situation that feels wrong to hear what I wish someone had said to me 14 months earlier. The feeling that something is wrong is information, not paranoia, not old age, not confusion. Information. Act on it. You do not need someone's permission to access your own account. You do not need to justify yourself to people who tell you you're being paranoid. You can revoke a power of attorney. You can call an elder law attorney and ask questions. You can call Adult Protective Services. You can call your other children, your friends, anyone you trust who is outside the situation. The fog that I was in for 14 months lifted the moment I made a phone call to my daughter and said the words out loud. That's all it took. One phone call, one honest conversation. My granddaughter poured her orange juice, and then she climbed up on the kitchen counter, the way she always does, when she's about to say something, and she looked at me and said, "Grandma, what are we watching tonight?" I said she could pick. She picked something I had already seen but didn't say so. We sat on the couch in my house, in my living room, in the life that is mine, and I thought about how far I had come from that morning when she had opened an empty refrigerator and asked me a question I hadn't been able to answer. I can answer it now. I am here, I am fine, and nothing in my life belongs to anyone but me.